class, it's Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to review public speaking. Now, although this is argumentation and debate, or a variation of argumentation, we do present and we will be, especially in our activities, we'll be doing public speaking related activities. So if you've taken public speaking courses before, this would be a review. If not, this would be an introduction. So I'm just going to review some basic tips and some basic strategies for overall public speaking. And you can use this video later on for other classes or other classes where you do have to give presentations. All right, let's begin. All right, so we're going to briefly go over public speaking and some aspects of public speaking, such as speech apprehension, considerations for the audience, brainstorming, informative speaking, and outlines, types of delivery, types of delivery such as extemporaneous delivery and impromptu delivery, and additional factors for delivery. All right, I gotta move myself. All right. So with some of these assignments, whether it be for communication studies classes, speech classes, or any other class where you have to give presentations, you may feel a little bit nervous. So here are some tips to ease that nervousness so you can dive into your speech. First, you use those nerves to your advantage. So when we're feeling anxious about something, we have a tendency to want to control those feelings. So some of those things that we might be more motivated to do is to practice our speech and go over our organization and go over our note cards and the like. So just make sure to not be super nervous and use that anxiety for your advantage. Understand your rational and irrational fears. Sometimes we might hype up our fears so much that we might think, oh my gosh, everyone's going to laugh at me when I give my speech, or everyone is going to not like my speech. More often times than not, people are paying attention to you, but they might be thinking about their own performance. And as your instructor, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So I'm certainly not laughing at you. I want you to express yourself, and I can't wait to hear it. So, but you might have some actual concerns, such as your performance, your grade, and just seeing how it all comes together. Because this is a performance-based class, it's kind of like, okay, we're, lights, camera, action, you're on the show, right? Many times I have students from theater class, and when we talk about speech apprehension, they talk about, hey, how to navigate those nerves and how they're looking forward to classes like this because they've done this before. So just think about what are some of your rational and irrational fears and work through them. But of course, if you have any questions or you just need to lend, if you want me to lend an ear to some of those things, just let me know. So next, we will talk about maintaining a receiver orientation. So as the public speaker, and of course as your instructor, I'm not exempt from this. We want to make sure that we're thinking about the audience, being audience centered, and keeping the audience in mind when we present. So making sure our speech is organized, making sure we're prepared for our delivery, making sure that our speech is understandable. If we're using technical jargon, making sure that we define it for the audience so the audience can follow along. So when we're too busy thinking about the audience experience, we don't have time to think about our own fears. That makes sense. Keep a positive attitude and use visualization techniques. So just think about visualizing yourself doing well. It can also be a device for you to prepare because you are using your imagination to rehearse your speech. Use breathing techniques and just be prepared. If you're prepared, and especially if you have your note cards with you, you'll be able to worry about the experience of interacting with your audience non-verbally versus focusing on your fears with your speech. All right. So you want to focus on the meaning and substance of a debate. So, for example, when we are going back and forth, those apprehensions can be amplified because not only are you giving your own presentation, but you may be responding to your opponent. So focus on the actual speech or the actual verbal battle, if you will, versus presenting to the audience. Plan a great intro and attention getter so you can grab the attention of the audience. Treat it as a conversation. As an instructor, I like this technique because I like to feel like during lectures, of course, I'm giving information like I am right now, but I also like to approach it as having a conversation with a bunch of people, right? So by treating my speech as a conversation, I'm able to have that connection and reduce the nerves. Breathe, smile, kind of doing that emotive approach where we can visualize, think of ourselves as being in a happy place, and go ahead and performing our speech. All right. So when we're giving a presentation, we want to think about our listeners as well. Think about why they're listening and being sensitive to certain demographic identities such as culture, gender, age, group membership. Think about the number of people in the classroom and the attitudes, beliefs, and values of our audience. Identify and cater your remarks to the audience experience, or if you're talking about something that the audience might not have experienced, try to find something that connects, identifies. So for example, if I'm talking about a topic, I even though my students are from different backgrounds, different experiences, different ages than myself, I might connect the fact that we are in the same school, or this is something about Southern California, or something about America, or this is a shared online experience. So I'm using that technique even though we are different. I'm trying to find one tie that binds us all to connect to our speech. All right, so next we gotta choose our topics. So depending on which assignment I'm going to give you, sometimes you'll be able to choose your assignment and sometimes I give you your assignment. So more often than not, for debates, I put you guys into groups, split you up, and just assign speech topics to you. But for persuasive or policy speeches, I want you to choose and decide. So you want to define the purpose and think about the topic and the scope of your speech. All right. So in brainstorming, you can do several things such as think about your personal experiences, interests, and hobbies that can relate to some of the topics that we choose to do in class. Now, although these techniques are really good for informative speeches, you can use some of these for persuasive and policy speeches as well. But just note, at least for my class, policy and persuasive speeches tend to focus on organizational, political, or societal issues and problems. So use that lens to take that personal inventory. Like, what are some of the things that you're dealing with, or people in your community are dealing with, or those types of issues that you're interested in learning about and talking to us about. And with that in mind, you can create categories and list 5 items that come to mind, or search the internet. One of the cool things about my job and being chronically online is that I get to have a ear on the streets about what's going on, at least based on what my algorithm tells me. So use that hobby of searching the internet to find your topic. Now, just a brief note, if you are choosing a topic that is a current event, just have to be careful because current events are ever changing. So with those type of speeches, you can do them, that's fine. Just talk about like, hey, what's currently happening, and maybe do a little bit like of historical background information on it a little bit, just in case things change, or to at least add more content to your speech. All right. So like I said before, in this class, we address societal, organizational, or social issues. So you can simply just list those types of subjects that you already know about and subjects that you want to learn more about. For the assignments that I do allow you to choose your topic, I really do want, especially when we consider both the communication aspect and critical thinking aspect of this course, I want you to choose topics that you care about. Or you're like, hey, I'm curious about this topic. We're talking about it on the news. What is this about? So that way, hey, you can learn more about it, teach us about it, and when you are connected to that topic, it generally shows through your delivery. It can help out with the nerves as well because you are passionate about the topic. And students tend to perform better, especially with delivery, if they talk about something that they care about. They, for example, students might be like, okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, we're going to talk about coral reefs, right? And I care about coral reefs, but if you don't, that's going to show in your topic because you're going to be boring yourself when you're up there and then boring us. So those are just some caveats. But of course, if you have any questions about that, let me know. All right, so just have informative speaking topics. I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but thinking about the lens that I just talked about, societal and social issues, we can think about objects and processes, events, concepts, descriptions, explanations, and instructions. If you need to incorporate instructions, if it's relevant to the topic, you do so as well. But those are just a couple of types of topics you can include in your speech. So next we are just going to just talk about general organizational patterns. Now for our classes, I provide like a separate, like, hey, here's how to do the assignment video, or if we're in a hybrid situation or hybrid course, I'll tell you in person how to do the outline. This is just an overall general organizational pattern of a form of speech. So in general, we have 3 to 5 main points. We have an introduction and preview our ideas. For example, today we're going to talk about A, B, and C. We have a conclusion, review our idea, and we use transitions. So transitioning from one idea to another, then transitional words and transitional phrases, internal previews. So that goes in our central idea slash thesis. Today we're going to talk about A, B, and C, and our internal summaries. In conclusion, we'll say today we'll talk about, or today we just talked about, or in conclusion, we just talked about A, B, and C. So in the introduction, you'll have your attention getter. You'll have like this audience connection or credibility where we establish the importance of the topic, previewing our thesis, central idea, main points. And if you do use a stat or a quote, you still have to cite that source verbally by saying either according to or according to such and such. You still want to cite that source verbally within the introduction if applicable. Then we have the body section. So we're dividing our points to 3 to 5 subpoints using transitions, and I will give you the outlines for that, but just follow logical order, main idea, any verbal citations, you'll say verbally, and text within your outline. Then with the conclusion, you're going to review your main points, give a reminder of why the topic is important, have an impactful closing. You can also use some of the strategies for your attention getter, for your closer, but in order to get credit for the conclusion section, you want to make sure to have those elements, that recap and that closing. And if you use Dr. Stat, cite that source. All right. So next we're going to talk about delivery. So with delivery, there are several ways you can speak through notes, such as extemporaneous speaking, impromptu, where you don't have a lot of preparation. You can also present through memorization and manuscript. So we're not going to necessarily focus on memorization and manuscript right now, but those are some examples of delivery styles. Now, the extemporaneous speech, is planned in advance and presented in a direct conversational manner. So your debates are partially going to be extemporaneous because you will have an outline format they can follow, but you have a little bit of wiggle room because it's kind of like you're presenting your ideas, going back and forth, and you can respond to someone's ideas. So with extemporaneous speaking, you're going to use notes, practice in advance, and in general, each performance is a little bit different than the last time. So I live this because sometimes I'm scheduled to teach a class back to back. So because I'm teaching a class back to back, I provide the same slides, the same notes, all those things, but it's going to be a little bit different with each class. So for example, it might be a different type of day. I might have a bunch of coffee, so I have a little bit more energy versus the afternoon class. The afternoon class, I might be a little more chill because I just went over the material. I have different sets of students, so they have different questions that I have to be prepared for. So each performance is a little bit different. Okay, what's up here? Then we have impromptu speaking. So the speaker is called upon to speak off the cuff spontaneously. So within an in-person class or hybrid class, sometimes this happens when we're in our discussions and I'm asking follow-up questions. So that's a little bit more of an impromptu exchange. And you can use these skills in a debate. So in order for us to do well in instances of impromptu speaking, we want to make sure we know the material one in advance, like an extemporaneous speaking. The tone is more conversational, more interactive, but we can easily adapt to the audience. It might it might be less organized or not as organized just because we are speaking off the fly. And then we might have more fluencies, such as filler words, so you have to watch out for that. But in this class, we'll have a combination of impromptu versus extemporaneous speaking styles. Now, if you're in an in-person class, and or if you are taking this class online, we do have to think about delivery, but we'll have separate situations or considerations for each. So, for example, appearance, so everybody looks nice and things like that. So just make sure that just in general that you're dressed for the occasion. Make sure that you're not doing excessive body movement. So, for example, in an in-person class, we like to call that a speech dance, where they're all dancing around. And it's not that people just start dancing on purpose. Those nerves and that energy has to go somewhere. So sometimes it goes in your feet, like happy feet. So you want to make sure to stand still, stand tall, and speak. Now, an online class or an online delivery, there's other considerations. So I have to think about this too when I'm giving my lecture because, when I'm not lecturing via the computer, I might sit like this or like this because this is my computer or be hunched over. So I have to remember, like, oh, I am in class right now, whether it be online synchronous or asynchronous. So I have to make sure to sit up tall, watch my background. Sometimes in some of my videos, my cat's in the background, so talk about impromptu. But I have to make sure that even though I am in the comfort of my office or my home office slash guest room, I have to make sure that I'm looking at the camera, make sure that I have a good posture, and make sure like, hey, this is not the time to do this or this or this. So be mindful of that as well. And if you are speaking online, make sure to have it well lit as well. This room luckily is well lit in certain times of the day, but I like to have my lamp just so I can lit myself a little bit more. And I have my microphone so you can hear me. So think about those considerations. If you're in person, then make sure that you're speaking loudly, making that eye contact so you're not just looking at a camera, you are looking at the room and scanning, matching the proper facial expressions for the tone of the speech, and you're good to go. But if you do have any questions, let me know. Then we have different factors in vocal delivery. So think about the loudness and the volume of your voice. especially in an in-person setting. Make sure to have a moderate speech rate. So that's one of my Achilles heels as an instructor. I naturally speak fast. So in a video, I'm more mindful of that, but in person, sometimes I might have to repeat what I said because I just kind of came out really fast. So just make sure to have a moderate speech rate. Make sure to be mindful of pitch, the highness or lowness of your voice. Higher pitch voices are slightly harder to hear versus lower pitch bass voices. So if you do have a higher pitch voice, make sure to speak a little louder. Then articulation, making sure that we pronounce all parts of the word. Some common errors are deletion, leaving off parts of the word, or substitution, replacing a part of a word with an incorrect sound. In addition, adding extra parts of the word or slurring, overlapping one end of the word to the beginning of the next. So just be mindful of those errors of articulation or crisp vocal delivery. And finally, we want to use crisp and dynamic language, be clear, use appropriate language, try to reduce your filler words such as or and be inclusive. So make sure that you're being culturally sensitive to your audience. All right. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions about delivery, please let me know. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.